Good afternoon to all. I know we are tired and maybe hungry, but we can say good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for mentioning the Jeff Small Grants program, and I hope that many persons will know about this program and would apply for grants. But I was given the task to speak on the social and economic factors affecting the development of communities in North Windward and North Leeward region. The social and economic factors that affect the development of indigenous communities have their genesis centuries before their current manifestations. The history, particularly of the Garifuna people in St. Vincent, is pregnant with conquest and banishment, colonial exploitation, replete with stereotypical stigmas and psychological acculturation, coexisting with loss of culture and national pride. This dilemma continued and continues to haunt current and perhaps future generations of Garifuna people in the north of St. Vincent, who remain in search of a voice, social identity, rights to land, and battle with poverty and a sense of entitlement. With these hypotheses in mind, a few thought-provoking questions would follow. 1. As a young civilization, is it then too immature, or premature that is, to undo the political and social injustice, or too early to create a catalytic environment that would facilitate change? Changes in the way descendants of Caribs are viewed, while creating opportunities and platforms for the socio-economic development of that people. Number 2. Would history absolve the great civilization in the Caribbean that have come to be known as the Garifuna civilizations? And would they acknowledge and give credence for their struggle and resistance to protect their sovereignty? This paper would attempt to assess the geopolitical factors, economic marginalization, loss of land and resources, discrimination, and unemployment that affect the development of communities in North Windward and North Leeward region. Firstly, popular history is replete with myths concerning the Carib and Garifuna people of St. Vincent. While the myths provide connections between the pre- and post-conquest of Caribbean people and polish the victories of virtues of the ethnic groupings and generations, such biased historiographies have demoralized the pre-colonial people of St. Vincent. In subjective historical accounts, the Caribs were notorious for their warlike characteristics and their proclivity for cannibalism. Such tales solidified the false premise upon which these people were banished, declared barbaric for their civic act of protecting their patrimony. Accounts of invasion of Arawak settlements have further embossed the savage history and incivility of these Amerindians. Whether or not such a Caribbean invasion actually happened is a matter of considerable debate among ethno-historians and archaeologists, according to Wilson, 1993. However, these tarnishing stories of this kind would be the justification for an act that is so cruel that this will not scroll down. Pardon me. Let me do that again. However, tarnishing stories of this kind would be the justification for a sin so cruel as to dispossess their lands, annihilate the language and cultural expression of a people, a rich culture and tradition that was lost to their successors, whose connection to a legacy they deservingly should have embraced was abrogated and was forced to adapt to a new culture that's different to their kind. Due to the results of the negative propaganda by Europeans, we know more about the Garifuna and their fighting against the French and British than we actually know about their way of life. Sad. I therefore wish to pose the poignant question coined by the contributor to the Garifuna American Heritage Foundation United Incorporated website, and I quote, would the Garifuna be able to preserve themselves as a culture, a social culture, Or would it hemorrhage to the point of gradual extinction, as had happened to the others in the curriculum Caribbean earlier? The answer is clear. The socio-cultural evolution of Garifuna in St. Vincent and Grenadines is almost negligible. Consequently, the aftermath of a social genocide had left the people without a language and a connection to their homeland. According to Berry in 1999, and I quote, "Identity usually implies a sense of attachment. Social identity is that part of an individual's self-concept that says who I am, which derives from one's knowledge of one's membership in a social group, together with the value and emotional significance attached to that membership. Loss in social cultural identity through the loss of language and culture, which are synonymous, often leads to a sense of alienation, cultural and social and psychological detachment, and low self-esteem. While the Garifuna remaining in St. Vincent lost their vigor of their cultural identity, it has flourished among the people shipped to Central America. Expressions of Garifuna culture, including language and religion, are very much alive in Central America and even in nearby Dominica. The question then remains, how is it that a people in exile retain their culture even in the face of psychological acculturation, and the Garifuna that remain in St. Vincent didn't? What then are some of the forces and socio-political factors that led to the eradication of their socio-culture today? Was it a concerted effort on behalf of the colonizers to eradicate and annihilate the culture of the resident Garifuna? These are questions yet to be answered in order to exhume our lost connections. Perplexingly, the story of Garifuna, a heroic banishment to Baliso, was underplayed by Eurocentric historians who failed to understand that the exodus preceded a glorious resolution with the treaty in 1773 by Britain. In February 1773, there was a treaty that was signed between the British and the Black Caribs in St. Vincent that gave rights and ownership to the lands and northernmost part of St. Vincent to the proud Caribs who unwaveringly fought for their rights to their homeland. According to Williams, 2013, this monumental achievement, and I quote, was the first time in history that an indigenous Caribbean people had forced the British to sign a peace accord with them. This was testament of the resilience, intellect, political, diplomatic pedigree of our people, pardon me, technology, okay. So this is testament of the resilience, intellect, political and diplomatic pedigree of our people, and undeniably the genesis of Caribbean politics as we know it today. However, in 1795, 22 years later, the Second Carib War, incited by British breach of the treaty, which led to the death of Paramount Chief Joseph Chartier and the eviction from their lands. The Garifuna people were charged with high treason against the British Crown for fighting to maintain their homeland. In 1804, an act that was passed in the St. Vincent legislature then revested the lands held by the Caribs during the time of the treaty to the Crown. The Caribs remaining in St. Vincent were later pardoned by the act in 1805, but they lost all claims to the lands they formerly occupied. Social anthropologists could never have predicted the disenfranchisement it would later cause, fracturing the economic potential, social identity, and a dwindling ardent pride and morale of a people who was later relegated to a minority ethnic group. The Garifuna, like many kindreds in the curriculum Caribbean, developed a dependence upon and close relationship with the environment and its resources. Based on historical accounts, their religious beliefs and reverence for mountains and other natural features as deities enforce their stewardship and respect for the environment. However, upon conquest, the Europeans acquired all the lands belonging to the Garifuna and denuded the forests of St. Vincent. Also, to satisfy the need for fuel as well as timber for construction in Barbados, the British looked to St. Vincent, located a mere 140 square kilometers to the west. Further environmental degradation came with the inflow of French and British colonists who clear-cut forests while introducing their domestic animals. In the advance of the insurrection, the remaining Caribs were forced to relocate to the more remote portions of the Leeward side of the island. According to Miller, 1979, in the end, they encountered even greater difficulty to retain their traditional systems of living with the land, in reverence to the wishes of the ancestors and stewards for the next generation. This socioeconomic dislocation inevitably hampered the further growth and development of the emergent Garifuna people and their livelihoods, and affected their ability to gain wealth to this day. Today, the people of the North Windward and North Leeward region are still primarily producers of agricultural produce and fisheries, and have suffered from severe impact from climate variability, global market forces, and disease infestations. Climate change exacerbates the difficulties already faced by these people. In St. Vincent, we are exposed to high levels of risk to hazards, as Mr. Prince mentioned, which have significant impact on our economy and our fiscal stability. However, inadequate land use policies give rise to communities that are close to rivers and coastal zones, increasing their vulnerabilities to hazard, to landslides, flash floods, and storm surge. These climatic will increase the stress on water availability, coastal investments, natural infrastructure, and livelihoods generally. For example, Hurricane Thomas affected the island in 2010, causing loss and destruction to agricultural crops, mainly banana and plantains, at an estimated value of EC 35 million. Before most residents recovered from that impact, a severe flood occurred in April 2011 on the northern side of the island. These rainfall and flash flood occurred These torrential rainfalls and flash flood occurred mainly on the northeastern section of St. Vincent in a major agricultural area. Flood damage to the agriculture sector was estimated at EC 65 million. Again, heavy rains in December 24th provoked intense flash flooding that directly affected agriculture loss, mainly in the northern part of the island again. Areas like Georgetown and Sandy Bay suffered loss primarily in banana, root crops, and vegetables. Particularly affected were low-income families whose agricultural production was primarily for personal consumption and local sales. It was estimated that 1,115 farmers were affected. Total damages in the agriculture sector for this disaster was estimated at US $1.4 million. These hazards collectively further contributed to the socioeconomic deficiency among the most vulnerable populations in St. Vincent and Grenadines. The Country Poverty Assessment Report in 2007 reported that 30.2% of the population were poor, and 2.9% of the same population were indigent. So we have a case whereby 30.2% of the population was declared as poor. In terms of the geography of poverty, however, Georgetown and Sandy Bay census district or divisions, which comprised 9% of the population, accounted for as much as 16.5% of the poor in St. Vincent. The Bottle and Glass area within Barley census district was also a community with significant levels of poverty. Additionally, the household that were estimated to be poor also displayed low levels of education and training, had more children, lived in poor homes. They had few income earners and had a high incidence of unemployment, up to 25.3%. Employment in the North Windward and North Leeward region are generally vulnerable livelihood opportunities, such as small-scale farming and retailing.
construction workers, fisher folk, craft makers, general laborers, and to a lesser extent, service workers. The increase in unemployment, however, was mainly due to the decline in the value of the banana export by 68%, a corresponding decline in the volume of banana export in St. Vincent by 73% between 2000 and 2012, with an 85% decrease in farmers who actually produce bananas. In conclusion, although several centuries have elapsed and the political systems have shifted, the socio-economic realities in the Garifuna community is still shaped by the same geopolitical and climatic factors. Foreign policy and restrictions on international trade. However, colonial conquest and exploitation of these resources have robbed the Garifuna people of their fair chance for socio-economic development. Banishment and genocide of Garifuna people and the consequent discrimination have contributed to the loss of socio-cultural traditions, including the language and identity. Without an identity, it is reasonable to conclude that the psychological vestiges and disentitlement of colonialism have affected the social morale and national pride among our people. Unplanned developments have exposed communities to hazard that leads to further economic deprivation and poverty. Primary production systems left the economy vulnerable to climate-related disasters and further decline in related employment. While socio-political factors may inhibit economic development of Garifuna descendants, one of the main deterrents to building lasting peoplehood is the lack of recognition of the political acumen displayed by the Garifuna in the Eastern Caribbean. Thank you.